Greetings, my friends, and welcome to a review of Fantastic Four. Now, why bother, you may ask? Everyone who's anyone has already posted a review of Fantastic Four. We all get it. The movie has a 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. It only made $26 million. I know it's bad. You know it's bad. We all know it's bad. I'm not gonna see it. What's the point of throwing your hat into the ring now? Well, the answer to that is actually quite simple. I saw this movie opening night, and not long afterwards, I went away on a trip for work, which is something I really like to say because it makes me sound like an adult. I'm a grown-up. Now, because I was in a hotel in Maine, I didn't really have the opportunity to talk about this movie like I would have wanted to. But now that I'm back home for a couple of days before I have to leave again, I figured that now would be the perfect time to actually sit down and talk about this movie. If I had done a video then, I can say, and I don't feel bad admitting this, that it would have been terrible. It would have been completely unwatchable because it would have just been me drinking and yelling. It would have been like drunk history without the coherence. I'm all done doing that, by the way. I also wasn't sure how exactly I wanted to go about it. Was I going to do a stream of conscious, like, kind of vlog review, where I would just talk about the different issues I had with the movie and call it a day? It's not like I would have run out of topics to talk about. I mean, the movie's loaded with issues. But I decided that I was going to take it one step further, and this is the result of that. There's a lot about this movie that needs to be understood in order to fully understand why we got exactly what we got. So join me for what I hope is not just another incendiary vlog-style review of Fantastic Four. Join me for what, for better or worse, is an autopsy of Josh Trank's Fantastic Four. Part 1. The Backstory. Let's start by talking about some necessary backstory about the people involved with this movie and my particular connection to it. For me, there's always been two genres that I've held very close to my heart, and that's horror movies and superhero movies. You see, I've always been a comic book fan, and I've always loved seeing those comic book movies on the silver screen ever since I was a little kid. And as I got older, I got more critical of those comic book movies because I cared so much about them. More so now that I write my own comic book, and it's also about superheroes. Now you can call this a shameless plug if you want, because, let's be honest, it is. For those of you who are unaware, I've been working on a superhero comic for the past year now. At the time of this recording, we've got 25 pages posted on our website, and over the past year, I've written arcs and arcs of just content for this comic book that just hasn't been drawn yet, but it's probably probably 4 or 5 arcs that I've got completely written out exactly how I want them. So there's a lot to it. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is because it, like Fantastic Four, is about the origin of a team of superheroes. To me, the story about a team of superheroes coming together, it's the perfect framing device for character-driven storytelling. Now, in Torchbearers, which is the name of the comic that I write, the super abilities are there, and that's a fun part of it. Like, it's cool to come up with all of these different abilities for these characters and coming up with interesting action sequences to use them in, but to me, that's more like the icing on the cake. What I find the most fulfilling and rewarding are the parts where I am coming up with character moments and, coming up with good characters and the interesting interactions that these characters share. Now let's bring Fantastic Four back into the mix. It's never really been my favorite series of comic books out there, but I've always enjoyed it. Like, I think those characters are interesting, and I really like their powers. I think that the first Fantastic Four film that had Jessica Alba and Michael Chiklis in it, I think that the potential for a great film was there. It just suffered from really almost lackadaisical production. I mean, hell, even Rise of the Silver Surfer was complete garbage. There was nothing redeeming about that movie. Fast forward to the reboot of Fantastic Four set for 2015, and they got some pretty good actors involved in it. I thought Miles Teller was really good in Whiplash. Michael B. Jordan was great in Chronicle, and then you also had Jamie Bell and Kate Mara, who are two very underrated actors. And then we have Josh Trank directing, and he really showed his chops when he did Chronicle. That movie proved that he could do a superhero-like film on a small budget. He did it for $12 million. And the thought that comes to mind when you see a success like that is like, wow, imagine what he could do with $122 million. But unfortunately, very quickly, things started to take a turn. Josh Trank said initially that one of his ideas was to do something different with the superhero genre, and one of his main influences that he stated was actually, of all people, David Cronenberg. Now, I think it should be known, in the interest of full disclosure, that when a lot of these ideas were initially announced, I kind of took the route of the selfish purist who didn't want nobody fucking with my Fantastic Four. Which, if you'll remember, I said not too long ago that it wasn't even one of my favorite series of comic books out there. Now that I'm older and a little bit wiser, I've learned that different isn't always such a bad thing. I mean, sometimes a change might be the right change to take something from good to great. You'll never know if you don't change it. And in fact, sometimes I would say that it's better to take the risk and make the change and have it blow up in your face than to not change anything at all and then watch it stagnate. So Josh Trank's idea was to have it be more of a modern story. Victor Von Doom wasn't going to be the Victor Von Doom that we all know. He wasn't going to be some warlord from Latveria. No, he was going to be a guy, but he was going to be like a hacktivist or something like that. And when the Fantastic Four get their abilities, it's treated more as a body horror type thing as opposed to the great power, great responsibility, song and dance that we've been seeing for the last 15 years. Take Fantastic Four out of the equation for a second. Like, if you completely remove that franchise from this story concept, and you have an interesting take on a superhero story. The heroes get their powers and it isn't so, pardon the pun, fantastic. But here's the thing. DC has been setting up its own cinematic universe, and every single one of their movies are dark, brooding, and depressing. And then you've got Marvel, where their movies they have their serious moments, but there's a lot more fun, kind of camp to them. Do we really need comic books' first family to be dark, brooding, and depressing? And say what you will about Tim Story's Fantastic Four movie, at least it was having fun with itself. It's really dirty to say. It started to seem like story after story that came out about this new Fantastic Four movie was negative or was spun in a negative light. For example, some idiots started complaining about the casting of Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Storm. Let's address that non-controversy, shall we? If an actor is good in the role and the character is good, who gives a shit? Michael B. Jordan is a good actor, and he's a funny guy, and he fits Johnny Storm. Then we started to see the leaked images of Dr. Doom looking like he was Imhotep's stand-in in the Mummy films. There were stories of Josh Trank acting erratically on set, studio-mandated reshoots, all sorts of behind-the-scenes drama. Then came the ultimate kiss of death, the review embargo. Now, what is a review embargo? For the uninitiated, an embargo, spelled backwards, is oh grab me, as in oh grab me by the balls and don't let go, because now I can't post my review of this piece of media without the studio's permission. Until this particular date, no reviews may go up. I said I was done, but I lied. Now I'm paraphrasing that definition slightly, and it sounds really bad, but I think, depending on their usage, embargoes aren't really always that bad. But in this case, it was really, really bad. It's usually a distressing sign when you see that a review embargo is up until the day of a movie's release. Because usually what that means is that the studio has absolutely no faith in the movie that they're putting out. And what they're doing is essentially hoping that as many people will see the movie on the opening day as possible before the advanced reviews could have scared them away from it. And wouldn't you know it, Fantastic Four's review embargo was lifted the day it was released. So now we can start talking about that. Part 2, an hour of boring nothing. Let's time travel a little bit to August 6th, 2015. It's 8 p.m. in Attleboro, Massachusetts, and I had just purchased my ticket to Fantastic Four. I sit down in the theater and I'm sad to say that I've gone into it with a little bit less than an open mind. I usually do my best to not let behind-the-scenes drama of a movie spoil my enjoyment of it or cloud my judgment of what I'm gonna think about it, but that wasn't the case with Fantastic Four. I had heard from some friends that had already seen the film in the UK that it was less than stellar, so I prepared myself, I lowered my expectations, and got ready for what I thought was going to be a pretty bad movie. As long as this wasn't worse than Man of Steel, Green Lantern, or Amazing Spider-Man 2, maybe we wouldn't have a problem. We start the film by meeting a young Reed Richards at the ripe old age of 12, giving a presentation at school for Career Day. The assignment is to say what you want to be when you grow up. It's kind of a basic question to be asking a room full of fucking 6th graders, but what do I know? Reed goes up and says that he wants to do sciencey things. Like, he wants to teleport things, and he wants to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, you know. Kid shit. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm just going to recap the entire movie, because we'll be here all day if I do that. I do want to talk about this scene. As innocuous as it sounds, it's really important because it really sets the tone for how out of touch and off base this movie is. The teacher, played by Dan Castellaneta of all people, fails Reed Richards for the assignment. He's like, "Oh my god, Reed Richards, that science is not a career. That was not part of the assignment. You want to do all this fancy stuff. You can't do that, you fail. Go home, make some real money, exchange it for goods and services, have many peanuts." We also meet a young 12-year-old Ben Grimm. He lives in a junkyard, and he's got an asshole, abusive older brother. And whenever his asshole older brother beats him up, he'll say, "It's clobbering time." It's clobbering time. I've tried to think, for a while now, about a visual representation that accurately sums up my feelings towards that particular revelation, and I finally found it. This is dog. This is cat. Cat poops here. Now, if you were to take all of the surprises that await inside this poop igloo and put them out in the sun for 3 days, the face that you would make upon taking a whiff would be roughly the face that I made when I found out about that. The only person who was allowed to be a mean, abusive asshole and say it's clobbering time before he beats people up is CM Punk. Anyway, Ben and Reed become good friends, and Reed shows them the teleportation machine that he's built in his garage that's for some reason running off of a bunch of N64s when, even though this movie takes place, at least this scene takes place in 2007, logic would dictate that it would be running off of a bunch of Xboxes. What do I know? Apparently the processing power of a 64-bit console is higher than that of an Xbox. In any case, we fast forward a few years, and now Reed and Ben are 30-year-old men competing in a high school science fair. Miles Teller can almost pull off the high school kid look because he's got kind of a baby face. Jamie Bell cannot. I mean, both of these two are 28 and 29 years old, and they're playing teenagers, and it just looks ridiculous. You're fooling yourself if you think either one of them looks remotely 17. After all these years, Dan Castellaneta, for some reason, is still their professor and hasn't been fired for being an ass. And he's a judge in the science fair. So Reed shows off his teleportation machine. It completely works. It's so obvious that it works. And Dan Castellaneta is like, "Oh my god, Reed, why? Oh, you fail again. You're disqualified. This is a science fair, not a magic show. There's no science in this teleportation stuff. You also have to pay for the backboard that you destroyed by using this machine because the shockwave destroyed our backboard. You're paying for that. And by the way, I'm screwing your mom. You're adopted. Let me think of other horrible things I can say to you." That's basically what he's doing, and it's completely ridiculous. I've never been taken out of a movie so fast before. Luckily, Sue Storm and Franklin Storm are there, played by Kate Mara and Reggie Cathy, respectively. That's a funny thing, you know, Reggie Cathy is somebody I've always kind of, like, confused with Ossie Davis, who's dead. But Ossie Davis is somebody that I've always confused with Roscoe Lee Brown, who's also dead. All I know is that one of these three men was the narrator in the movie Babe. Tangent. Anyway, they recognize Reed's talents and they help him to complete his teleportation machine on a larger scale with the help of Sue's adoptive brother Johnny Storm and the recluse Victor Von Doom. Once the project is finished and they've managed to do a test on the world's worst looking CGI chimpanzee ever in history of all time, The kids get excited because they think they're going to be going to the alternate dimension because they were promised. They said, hey, you kids, you complete this project, we'll let you go to the alternate dimension. And then the antagonist of the film, called the government, appears, and they say, oh, yeah, well, good job, kids, on finishing this project. We're going to send NASA into the other side. Thanks for all your help, but, we've got it from here. We're going to bring in NASA. The dicks. Since these 30-year-old children are really upset that they were told, no, you can't go, they decided to get drunk one night, and they think it would be a super good idea if they're just like, hey, how about we go? We just go because the machine's right there. Who's gonna tell on us? We want to be the first ones to the other side. We're gonna do it. Now you may be wondering, what about Ben Grimm? What's he doing during all of this? Well, you see, in the old movies and in the Fantastic Four comics, Ben has always been he's a distinguished pilot. That's always been his thing, is that he was a pilot. In this movie, he's a distinguished rock because he doesn't do anything. I don't even think he pilots a coffee maker in this movie. They just invite him along because the plot suddenly remembered that Ben Grimm was part of the Fantastic Four and he needed to be there. And then you must be thinking, well, what about Sue? Why isn't she there? Well, Sue gets to go fuck herself. She's not invited. She can hang out on the sidelines. It's really weird to tout your movie as being super progressive when the only female character of any importance sits on the sideline while the boys do all the hard work. Now, it may interest you to know that all the time skipping and minimal happenings that I just described, that takes an hour to happen in the movie. The Fantastic Four are just about to get their powers, and there's only 45 minutes left of the film. Part 3. Planet Zero attention paid to making sense. Now, after we've had all this sciencey mumbo-jumbo and exposition and backstory, it's time for us to get into some more action-oriented, interesting stuff. There's only 45 minutes left of the film, so at this point, the movie's really only got one more shot to really rope the audience back in and keep them from falling asleep. The four guys go over to Planet Zero, they plant a flag in the ground, and doing so causes a chain reaction which causes an earthquake. And like idiots, they're like, oh god, things are exploding over there in the distance, let's go over there. And they rappel down a cliff, and they go walk over to it, and shit starts to explode. Now they have to run away, and it's like, way to go, you morons. They start to run away, they're climbing back up the cliff to try and make it back to the teleportation machine. And Victor falls into this lake of green ooze a la Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The others make it to the pods, but their doors don't close all the way, so Ben is getting attacked by rocks, which is the funniest looking shit you'll ever see in your life. Johnny's set on fire, and Reed gets splashed with some of the green ooze. And when they make it back, they teleport back to the regular Earth, and the force of this sets out like a blast, like an energy blast, and this energy blast hits Sue and only Sue, in spite of it knocking out the power to most of, where's the Baxter Building, fucking New York? Wherever they are. It takes out like it cuts the power, and only Sue will get hit by it. They're all knocked out by this, and they wake up later inside a research facility where they're all kind of, they're being kind of experimented on. Like, Reed notices now that he's got the stretch powers, Johnny's on fire, Ben is now a rock monster, and Sue has the ability to turn invisible. Reed reacts to this by running away from the facility in terror, thereby abandoning everybody. The scary evil government, they tell Ben that, hey Ben Grimm, you're a terrible rock monster now, and we're gonna use you as a weapon. And I have to wonder why this is always the first thought of any sort of government or military officials in these movies. It's like, hey Jurassic World, you guys are building some dinosaurs over there, that's pretty cool. What would happen if I strapped an M16 to one of those velociraptors you're building? Or now we've got Fantastic Four. It's like, hey, Ben Grimm, you're like a big fucking rock guy now. That's pretty cool. How about I strap an M16 to your forehead and we just ship you on a helicopter and just see what happens? So Ben agrees to this, and then we do another goddamn time skip of one year later, and we see some kind of news footage of Ben Grimm, this monster, going around overseas, and he destroys a couple of Jeeps, and some government guy is just like, he's like, yeah, this guy is super successful. See him destroying that fucking Jeep? He's like, this guy's been a success for the last year. And now they want to do the same thing for Johnny Storm. They're like, we're going to turn this fire guy, he's going to be our next weapon. Isn't that cool? He's having, which Johnny's all for, and Sue and her father are just like, no, fuck that, we can't do that. We gotta reverse this shit. We gotta get rid of these powers because they're nothing but trouble. So another trip to Planet Zero is planned, but they're basically just like, well, we don't know what to do. We're completely useless without Reed Richards. We need to find him. So that is the goal now, to find Reed Richards, who ran away and he's been gone for a year. And this part of the movie is what allows Sue to do the only thing of importance that she does in the movie, and that is finding Reed. She stares at a computer screen and finds Reed. That's it. I swear to you, they're just like, Sue, you need to find Reed because you're good with pattern recognition. And she's just like, yeah, all right. And she looks at these big monitors, and she sees the names of different like web addresses and, you know, all this different shit scrolling by, and she's just like, yeah, cool, okay. Now, allow me to take a quick aside to say that I loves me some good reincorporation, especially when it's subtle. If there's some really good subtle reincorporation, I love that shit. It's great. Now, Fant Force Stick wouldn't know subtlety if it clobbering timed them in the face. Earlier in the movie, when Reed has like not first meeting with Sue, but like when he goes with them, like the first time they have like a meaningful interaction, they're in a library, and Reed is talking about how he's been reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and how he really identifies with the character of Captain Nemo. Now, if you've been watching movies for as long as I have, you pretty much know right away that this only exists to be brought back later. It's not like Fantastic Four is making some sort of commentary or any kind of profound point on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea or its connection to anything. It only exists to be brought back later. Sure enough. While searching for Reed, she's looking at this monitor and seeing all these different names scroll by, and she sees one that's capped, C-A-P-T, _ Nemo, but instead of an E in Nemo, it's a 3, and she goes, Captain Nemo, I remember a couple years ago, Reed said he was reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and how he really liked Captain Nemo. This server is called Cap Nemo. That's gotta be Captain Nemo, it's gotta be Reed. It's completely lame, but that's how they find him. So they send Ben to go get Reed, and Ben appears and he like headbutts Reed, and like they're flying back to the facility, and it's only Reed and Ben on the helicopter, and Reed is like handcuffed and he's in like a containment cell, and he looks over at Ben, he's like, I'm sorry I ran away. He goes, you were my best friend, Ben. And Ben looks over and goes, I'm not your friend, Reed. So edgy you could shave with it. And it really sums up Ben's character nicely, because Ben Grimm does nothing in this entire movie, and it's perfect that he's a giant rock. You can sum up his character with these two lines that he has in the movie. Every single thing his character does can be summed up with either, help me, Reed, or I don't like you, Reed. Real compelling stuff. So when Reed makes it back to the facility, everybody's just kind of super chill to see him. Like, Johnny Storm gives him a hug, and even Sue's just like, oh, hey, Reed, nice to see you again. I'm sorry that we had to kind of send the fucking monster after you, but, you know, it's good to have you back. And he's like, yeah, it's fucking good to be back. I'm glad to be here, yeah. So in like 30 seconds, he completely fixes their teleportation machine. He's just like, and yeah, there you go. Now it's fixed. And so they send some nameless goons over to Planet Zero, and they're over there, and they're like, yeah, this is fucking Planet Zero. It's pretty cool. And then somebody's walking towards them, and who would it be but Victor Von Doom? It turns out he's alive after falling into a lake of ooze that we see melt his face. But what we really saw was that his astronaut suit got melted onto his face, and he's fused with it, so now he looks fucking stupid. So they bring him back to the regular Earth, and they've got him on this observation table, and they're like, oh my god, are you okay? And out of nowhere, Victor decides, he's like, you know what, fuck all of you. Planet Zero's the tits. I'm going back there, and I'm going to create my own world where I'll be in charge, and I'm going to destroy this planet. And that's just what I'm going to do, okay? Peace, bye. So he starts to leave the facility in a scene that's reminiscent of the first episode of fucking Elfin Lied, of all things. He starts using his, like, scanner's powers to start making everybody's heads explode. And he goes back to Planet Zero, where he's sometime created his own teleportation device that brings a black hole to Earth, and it starts sucking up cars and the Earth's crust, and all this stuff starts getting sucked into this black hole. People are dying by the thousands. Somehow. And the Fantastic Four are just like, oh my god, this is terrible. We should stop that guy before he destroys everything here. Let's go over there and kick his butt. So I'm in the theater at this point, and I'm just like rubbing my nose. I'm just like, oh my god, I'm bored out of my tits. I finished eating my popcorn after the first goddamn trailer. I'm such a fucking pig. And then I look up at the screen, and I'm like, wait a minute. This looks like an action scene. Oh, finally! It's been an hour and a half, but about goddamn time. So the Fantastic Four, they make it over to Planet Zero, and they employ the brilliant strategy of attacking Doom one at a time, and he basically just wipes them aside. Like Johnny's like, ah, and he's just like, nah, fuck that shit. And Ben's like, brr, and he's like, no, get the hell out of here. Reed's like, stretch, and he's like, fuck, no, get the hell out of here. And then they're like, wait a minute, maybe we should just attack him together. And they're just like, alright, yeah, why didn't we do that? Start. So they attack him all together, and then Ben says, it's clobbering time. Apparently, he's like, you know who really had the right idea? My abusive asshole older brother who used to beat the shit out of me. It's clobbering time, and he punches Victor, and he sends him into his own black hole machine, and he disintegrates and dies. Total action time, 10 minutes, maybe. Part 4. Swift end to a shit film. So the Fantastic Four return to Earth and they survey the damage. They look over this giant crater that was caused by the black hole sucking everything up. Death and destruction everywhere, and triumphant music starts to play as they look over the devastation, and I couldn't help but notice that it was tonally very out of place. It wasn't like hopeful triumphant music. It was like, no, it was like happy. It was like do 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 do, and I was like, what the fuck is this doing here? It's like if you watch the movie Sunshine and then out of nowhere they started playing Ain't Going Down Till the Sun Comes Up. I'd just be out of place. We then skip forward in time a goddamn again. And now the Fantastic Four, they're in their own facility so they can do their own research and whatnot. And they're just kind of shooting the shit, and Reed says, he's like, it's like, now that we're a team, I was like, we should have like a team name or something. And they all start throwing out some terrible suggestions, and then Reed kind of says offhandedly to Ben, he's just like, man, Ben, it's like, we've come a long way, haven't we? You remember when we were kids, and we were in my garage building my Nintendo 64 powered fucking teleportation machine? Wasn't that crazy? And here we are now, and I've got stretchy powers, and you're a hideous rock monster. Isn't that great, Ben? Look how far we've come. And then Ben, in the clunkiest line of dialogue ever delivered, he goes, yeah, man, it's pretty fantastic. And then Reed's eyes light up. He goes, I know what we're gonna call ourselves. And then it cuts to black. And then I, in the theater, who have just sat through an hour and 45 minutes of fucking shit, am greeted with that. And then I lean back in my chair, and it was completely involuntary. I just go fuck yourself. It felt as natural as blinking at that point. Guy behind me starts losing his shit. He goes, ha ha, yeah, I thought it sucked too. At least I have a kindred spirit. This movie baffles me. Still, and it probably will baffle me for a long time. This movie existed solely to set up another movie that can't exist anymore because the main villain is fucking dead. Now, I understand that comic books, characters come back from the dead all the time for myriad list of reasons. That's not the point. The guy was fucking disintegrated. It's not something that you just put an ice pack on and walk off. What we have here is a sloppy film. It was horrendously written and poorly executed. The actors did their absolute best with what they were given, but this was a movie where they were playing characters 15 years younger than themselves with dialogue that seemed like it was written by somebody who was from a different dimension. The pacing was all over the place with frequent time skips, horribly slow, droning exposition scenes, and no action to break it up at all. Part 5. Where does this leave us? So what's the takeaway from all this? What happens next? Where do we go from here? Well, I, for one, would really hate it if this was the flop that destroyed Josh Trank's career, because there's some real talent there, and he really showed some serious chops when he did Chronicle. Since all this negative PR with the Fantastic Four movie, he's already been dropped from the standalone Star Wars film he was going to do, and after tweeting his frustration at Fox for screwing around with Fantastic Four, it's unlikely that he's going to get a new job right away. It would really be unfortunate to see all that talent squandered, though. Maybe a team up with Max Landis again might be in order. Hell, grab Michael B. Jordan and you guys can do another thing like you did with Chronicle. Do another low-budget movie. I mean, you guys all excelled doing that. As for the Fantastic Four franchise, this is 3 movies now that have flopped under Fox's guidance. Most would like to see the rights for the franchise go back to Marvel and have them add it to their cinematic universe, and in fact, I believe there is an online petition to that effect. Do I think that's going to happen? No. I think it would be smart, because Sony is essentially doing the same thing, and if Fox were smart, they would do that too. Let Marvel do all the creative work while you just rake in the fucking dough. But I don't see that happening because Fox is still kind of able to hang their hats on the fact that the recent X-Men films have seen a dramatic increase in quality. The way I see it, I think Fox is stubborn enough to try again one last time with Fantastic Four before they'd be willing to nix it completely. Whatever does happen, I hope that they learn from the mistakes that this film made. That they understand that bad PR can really destroy a movie before it even comes out. And that nowadays, moviegoers are more smart than a lot of studios will give them credit for, and sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes they're not going to shell out the big bucks to see something just because they recognize the name. As for me, I'll still go to the movies with the hopes of seeing the same movie magic that I fell in love with years ago, and being influenced by all of that to make my own superhero comic better, or any other projects I work on better. Because after all, entertainment is great. Inspiration is, pardon the pun, fantastic. That was fucking lame.